Hello, I'm Charles Woolley.
I'm Liz Hayes.
I'm Liam Bartlett.
I'm Tara Brown.
And I'm Jock Thomson. Tonight on 60 Minutes.
War and the effects of war, the tragedies, the heartache, the struggles, and the thoughts of those who risked their lives and fought for king and country. As we see more and more young people marching at Anzac parades every year, wearing their loved ones' medals, have you ever thought about what goes on in the hearts and minds of the men who fought for us? Today, we will delve into the mind and emotions of John Wallace Thomson, affectionately known as Jock. In this very hangar and in this very plane, Jock took his first ever flight. As a young man, only 19 years of age, he left Australia to fight as a bomber pilot against Hitler's regime, the Luftwaffe. The Nazis swept through Europe, taking over country after country, killing innocent people and forcing our allies to surrender to their evil force.
The war started in 1939 after Germany invaded Poland. Britain and France declared war on Germany and sent out bomber squadrons. They targeted industrial factories, main cities, artillery bases, airfields and trains. Jock Thomson, an Australian bomber pilot during World War II, was a part of the 8th Squadron that recklessly went through enemy lines into German territory to take back what was stolen from them. Jock was simply carrying out his daily duties, a huge responsibility during the war against Germany. He undertook strategic bombing missions and intense gunfire beyond enemy lines, flying into what he thought could be imminent death. But somehow, he came out alive to tell his story today. What are the moral issues that affected this man for most of his life? What struggles did he face? And what were the demons that haunted him in the wee hours of the night, driving him to night sweats, alcohol abuse, medication and professional help?
So Jock, what was it like being assigned to be a bomber going to Germany? And tell us a bit about your experience.
The war started after Germany invaded Poland. It was our squadron's duty to attack Germany. It was a nerve-wracking experience to be assigned as one of the bombers. You know, I was nervous. I was afraid of getting killed. When I went on a raid, I thought about my friends back home, my parents. I was very aware how dangerous it was. I didn't like it. I mean, I was afraid.
So tell us about being afraid.
Oh, the fear was real. Every time we went out, we risked our lives. The adrenaline was pumping, and our stomachs often cramped up. Sometimes I had nightmares and woke up in a cold sweat. I knew I was killing people, but I had a mission to carry out. If I didn't succeed, our country may be run by evil dictators under German rule today. What was the worst of the two? Well, I had to protect what I loved, and I would fight to the death to do that.
So how did the bombing missions take place?
We'd get escorted to the bombing target by P-47 fighters. Heavy gunfire coming from every direction. You can only hope your plane isn't going to take any damage from the enemy. Once the bombs were dropped, it was straight out of there. I was one of the fortunate ones. On one of the missions, 59 B-17 bombers flew out, 5 got shot down, and 3 B-24 Liberators were lost. In all, 80 men were gone. If that was the kind of hell that us boys were taking from just hitting the coast of Germany, God only knows what was going to happen when we start flying deep into enemy lines.
So what actually goes through your mind when you're doing a bombing mission?
Every time that I thought of my parents, friends or family, it made me think of all the people I was killing. They all have friends and family like I do. It was a constant battle in my head between conscious, unconscious and subconscious minds. Between what I was doing being a responsibility to my country and loved ones, or just killing thousands of innocent people. You know, it was, at the end of the day, It was my duty to do what I was doing, and all that I thought, that this is life or death. I drop these bombs and get out of here, or I'll die.
I spoke recently with Adam Thomson, Jock Thomson's son. Here's what he has to say. So did your father ever speak to you about war and what he did?
He did, not a great deal. I think a lot of men of his time didn't like to talk too much about what they'd done and who they were during the war, but I also know a lot about my father via my mother. And I know that in those days, all young men felt they had a moral obligation to do something, to go off and fight in whatever capacity that was. And I do know about my father that he said he didn't want to know or see the people that he was killing. He knew that he was killing people, but at least he didn't have to see them. He'd be flying at, 15, 20,000 feet. He didn't have to actually look at the people in the eye and kill them.
I spoke with Grace Feige earlier on. Her mother lived through the bombings in Germany in the Second World War, and this is what she had to say.
So you were saying your mother lived through some horrific bombings in Germany during World War II before she immigrated to Australia. Tell us some more about that.
Oh yes, my mother, she was a very, very young girl, so little during the war. Her father, he had already gone to duty as a soldier away from the town. So there was her mother, her brother and herself. She was little, the youngest, the small child. And she remembers the day when the bomber pilots came over and bombed her town, and she lost that day her mother and her brother. And a very small girl had to live for a long time on her own with that loss. How could these men live with themselves today? How can they live with the tragedy that they've left in someone's life so young, left with no one? Her father, he died in the war as well. And here is this little girl having to fend for herself. It's so sad. It's so terrible.
So Jock, after seeing the footage of Grace Feige telling us the story of her mother and grandparents who experienced bombings firsthand, and you yourself could have been responsible for those bombings, what do you have to say to her?
I'm so sorry for her loss. All I can do is just cry with her. It was my duty, and that's the downside to what I was brought up to do. If you're watching, I'm sorry for your loss.
The battle in the minds of the bomber pilots will be a constant struggle of any war. The thought of having to kill people to keep your life will always haunt the young men that were placed into these missions. That's all we have time for tonight. We'll be back for another edition of 60 Minutes at 7:30 next Sunday. Thanks for your company. I'm Jesse Thompson. See you then.